And welcome back to Coaching with the Bible. This is episode 92, season 2, episode 38. Portion of the week is the portion in the Shlach, and our subject this week is trust. This portion is the portion that I read on the occasion of my bar mitzvah a lot of years ago, and have a real affinity for it and a real love for the story of unfortunate sin of the spies and the sin of the people as it relates to the story of the spies. It's an amazingly powerful and important subject to discuss and to talk about that story over and over and over again. Last year we talked about courage. We zoomed in specifically on the person known as Caleb, who I mentioned last year as my favorite person in the entire Bible. Go back and listen to last year's. I recommend it. I invite you to hear what we talked about last year with respect to the development and appreciation of the concept of courage. And this week, I want to talk about trust. In the context of the story of the sin of the spies, trust is a key element, and it has roles and places where it fits in multiple ways. First, it appears that in the sense that sending spies in the first place as an idea is the subject of the trusting relationship between God and the people. The choice of the individuals who are sent, that they're leaders in the people, is a sense that there's a level of trust in what it is that they're going to report. That they're not just sending any random 12 individuals, but these are people of repute, respectable, believable, trustworthy people. And that what they come back and report and what they come back and say is something that the people should take very seriously. Listen to, take heed of. And of course, there's risk involved in that decision, unknown at the time, of course, that it could go south and it could go bad. And we know that it did. But trust is in there. Moses is entrusting these individuals with the mission. He gives them a set of parameters, and he's trusting them to go and see the land and come back and report on what they see. The people have entrusted the spies with this mission to come back and maybe allay some concerns or worries or fears, potentially, about what it will mean to go into the land. And in essence, effectively, what seems to be at play here is that the entire relationship between God and the people rests on the shoulders of the trust of these 12 individuals. Again, we're not here today to assess the risk that's involved in this decision, but I do want to focus in on trust. The reason focusing on trust is because ultimately the result of the story is that there has been a breach of the trust relationships at play here that appears to be almost unfixable. 10 of the 12 spies, the ones who come back and report negatively about the land, about the possibility of conquering the land, die in a plague almost immediately. The rest of the generation does not merit to see the land. God is at a point in this week's reading where the destruction of the people is on the table, turning the nation into the descendants of Moses only and getting rid of everybody else. And on some level, effectively, that is what happens, because that generation does not go into the land. They all die out in the desert. And so on some level, the nature of the relationship, the trust relationship that was built between God and the people through the crucible of leaving Egypt and the crossing the sea, Mount Sinai, even the negative stuff with the golden calf, seems to be completely and utterly broken at this point. even when it is that later on in the portion where the people want to ascend the land and take the land of their own volition after the sin, the trust is not there. The relationship is not there. God is not with them. It's broken. And so trust is at a fundamental here. It's a fundamental principle. It's a fundamental core idea of what's going into the people here. And it's really important that we appreciate the significance of trust here. And obviously, as we always do in Coaching with the Bible, the concept of trust as it relates to our own personal lives, in our interpersonal relationships, in our families, in our work environments, in our communities. When we sort of extrapolate to the big and we go really big with it and we really zoom out, almost everything that we do on a day-in, day-out basis relies on some form of trust. And I won't say that it's respect, because I think those things are not the same. I think there's situations where we're trusting relationships, we're building relationships in communities, let's say, that are trust relationships, even if I don't necessarily respect everyone in the community, or even if I don't necessarily trust them every moment with my, with my stuff, or with a pet, or with my children. But there is a trust that has to exist that has to make those relationships work. To give you a great example from a recent experience, and I'll take just a couple minutes to unpack this, I spent a couple of days, about a month or so ago, in defensive driving school here in Israel. Just as a side point, if anyone wants to write a television show or a musical based on going to defensive driving school, totally in. It was a hilarious experience. I learned a ton. It happens to be from the instructor, and really helped me sort of rethink a little bit about my driving. I was there because of a couple of speeding tickets. Sorry about that. But what came away very clearly from my time there was that on the road, we have to trust people that we don't know, trust people that we wouldn't trust with anything else, and we are entrusting them with our lives. Admittedly, that scared the heck out of me at the time when I really thought about it, because the presenter said, the people in this room are the people you see on the road. The people in this room are the people you see in your communities. The people in this room are people you have to trust on the road with your life. And I thought, at that moment, we got to get like self-driving cars for every single person, because I don't trust any of these people to be on the road near me. And I'm sure they don't trust me necessarily either, because if I was in the room, there was a reason I was there. But trust is at the core of how we handle so many of those interactions with other people. We trust them maybe just enough. So there are differentiations in levels of trust that we need to have for functioning society and civility, as opposed to the deep trust relationships or trust-based relationships that we have in our homes and in our work environments. I am willing to acknowledge that and accept that that's for sure true. But what happens when there's a breach of trust? What do you do then? Well, let's understand what it is with respect to trust that we're looking for, and appreciate that the importance of trust in everything. So here's one key thing to appreciate why trust is valuable. In a work environment, in our home environment, when we trust our family members, we trust our teammates and our colleagues and our employees, then people are willing to do more. They're willing to take on greater risk. They're willing to get a little bit vulnerable and creative and try new things, experiment with the work. But when they don't trust each other, when they don't feel like trust in that sense might be having each other's back, minimally, then they're not willing to go that extra mile. They're not willing to do those things. Trust in a work environment is the sense that when you're on a project with a group of people, that everybody is taking care of their own. Everyone's picking up the slack for their own work, and on occasion, that picking up the slack for others who are having a bad day. That's that trust. That ultimately the project will succeed because everyone will have operated at the optimal level and have accomplished what it was that they meant to accomplish in that. That doesn't happen overnight. You can't squeeze that into one day together in a team environment. Trust takes time. But the reality of it is also is that at the same time that trust takes time, trust is so crucial that in the Navy SEALs, I quote the Navy SEALs actually a lot in different contexts of coaching. The Navy SEALs say, and this I read in a lot of different articles, that they'll take a medium performer with a higher level of trust than a higher performer with a medium level of trust. The sense that a medium performer perhaps can improve, but also the sense that the trust there is trust with their lives. And that the lack of trust with someone, that they're medium or mediocre with respect to trust, is too dangerous and too much of a risk, there's that term again, risk, to put it into play and into motion in those situations. Trust for them increases speed. As I said, in the work environment, it increases our willingness to take risks, but trust increases speed. At the same time that trust increases speed, in the Navy SEALs, trust, or a lack of trust, comes out when the pressure is amplified. So because there's a real trust relationship, pressure is less of a factor, or less of a risk, when you're in a trust relationship. We know that also the case is when we enjoy the people that we work with because we trust them, our work gets better. And so all these things are really important. We know also from our own personal lives that when people trust us, it feels good. In fact, psychology tells us, in the physiology of the brain, that when we know that people trust us, our brain seems to reward us for being trustworthy and for being trusted. And so there's a lot of factors that go into this with respect to the benefits and the value, obviously, of trust. Imagine a society where no one trusts each other. Imagine a family where no one trusts each other. Again, leave respect out of it because respect could be different. I can respect the grind of an athlete. I can respect the competition. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I trust them because I don't necessarily think that they always have me or my best intentions in mind. So that might be a distinction between respect and trust. I can respect how hard a person works. I can respect the effort that they put in. I can respect how much they care. But I don't trust them all the way just yet, because maybe I don't know them. Maybe my personal experience with them isn't to where I need it to be be able to trust at that level. And so that's where trust comes in. The people send the spies go, they spy the land for 40 days, they come back, their report, including visuals, is experienced by the people entirely negatively. Obviously, the debate or the argument between the 10 spies and the 2 spies doesn't help the matter. But at that moment, the trust is broken. The people weep, they cry, they want to go back to Egypt, they want to appoint new leadership. It's a disaster. And so the fundamental reason why they're leaving Egypt and they're in this process is to receive the 10 Commandments, the revelation at Sinai, which they a little bit seem to have messed up with the golden calf, and then to go into the land, which they seem to have messed up at this moment with the sin of the spies. And so at its core, it would seem that already at this moment, the nature of the relationship with God was already seemingly teetering and frail. And that this, with the spies, is that breach of trust, is the breach of the relationship based on a breach of trust. And now it's over. Moses brings it back to the degree by which God doesn't destroy the nation therein. But ultimately, what is to happen with respect to them going into the land isn't going to happen. And so you get that sense of what's going on here. And so when there is a breach, it is possible to fix the breach. It is possible to bring it back. And there's a sort of a 5-step process in, overcoming the breach, fixing that level of distrust. But it's certainly not easy, and there's no guarantee that the relationship ultimately will be repaired or restored to where it was before. And so the first part of that, we could talk about building trust, and hopefully at another time we'll really talk about how do we build better trust. Obviously, as I mentioned before, In a nutshell, it's really in the space of experience and shared experience and going out of our way and over reciprocating and doing more for the other to sort of show how we feel, how we think, and what we do. That is, in a really small 20-second nutshell, how we do the building of trust. And here, for just 2 minutes, how we repair on the breach of trust. So the first thing is to acknowledge that the trust has been broken. Really have to say it out loud. Like, you can't hide, you can't bury your head in the sand, can't hope that it goes away, can't not address it. You have to acknowledge that the trust has been broken. That's one, super important, as uncomfortable as that is. Number two is the admittance of the personal role. No explanations or excuses, no admit but kind of stuff that we've talked about before. Admit the role. What did I do here? What did I do here that was wrong, that causes breach in the relationship? It's humbling. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of opening up. But that admittance is important. Number three is an apology. Sincere, sorry, asking for forgiveness, taking all the steps necessary for, to seeking amends from the offended person. Explanations, not excuses. Number four is an assessment. Assess where the breakdown in the trust happened. Where was that? Did that happen because, I don't know, I did a couple of things wrong. I took the person's, too lightly. I didn't care enough. I didn't show dependability. I wasn't believable. Whatever it was. So an assessment of where the element of breach takes place. And then number five is an amend. Amend the situation by taking forms of corrective action to repair damage. That is going to require, over the course of time, overcompensating on some level, over-reciprocating on another level, really going to a great extent to put oneself in a position to be forgiven, to really appreciate where that person is, understanding what happened there, and taking all those critical steps to try to amend. Again, no guarantees. When one looks at the Bible from the people themselves, so Moses, again, is able to stop God, for lack of a better term, from destroying the people. The healing process and the reparation process from the side of the people effectively takes 38 years. The rest of the time in the desert. We don't necessarily hear from them everything with respect to that 5-step process of amending or repairing the breach of trust, but certain elements are there in that story. And so what we have here in this moment, in the period of the passing of the people from this space of having been slaves to this space where they were almost entering the land, to this massive breach, and now this real issue in the relationship between God and the people. God still loves the people. He's still going to take them ultimately into the land. He's still going to be their God. They're still going to be his children. He's still going to have the Torah revelational relationship with them in the desert, but it's changed. So we can appreciate that that's the case and that's possible and it's unfortunate, but it is real. And in our own personal lives, in our own relationships, to look at the relationships, the trust relationships that we have, assess them for what they are and where they are. In an honest assessment, what's the level of trust that's there? What's the level of trust that's not there? What do we need to do to deepen and strengthen the bonds of those trust relationships that we have so that they become better, stronger, for ourselves, so that we're better ultimately and that we can do more in our lives, but also for the other parties as well, so that they ultimately can do what it is that they want to accomplish in their lives and live their best lives. That is Coaching with the Bible for this week. See you next week.